The diplomatic ship Starbound Grace came out of hyperspace with a soft hum of its engines. Below it, the planet Thesara Prime floated like a jewel in the darkness of space. This world was the center of all galactic power. The Galactic Council ruled from here, making laws for hundreds of species across thousands of star systems. Ambassador Daniel Cole stood at the observation window of his ship. He was a tall man with gray hair cut short in military style. His face was calm, almost peaceful, but his eyes told a different story. They were the eyes of someone who had seen too much death and learned to live with it. He wore the formal uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. The dark blue fabric was pressed, perfect. Several colored ribbons decorated his chest, each one representing a medal or honor. To the aliens waiting below, these ribbons meant nothing. They could not read human military records. They did not know that Daniel Cole had spent 30 years in the most dangerous special operations unit humanity had ever created. Before becoming a diplomat, Daniel had been a ghost. He had fought in shadows on 12 different worlds. He had killed enemies that his own government denied existed. The scars hidden beneath his uniform were a map of conflicts that would never appear in any history. Book now, he was 62 years old and officially retired from combat. The diplomatic corps had recruited him 5 years ago. They said his experience made him perfect for dealing with difficult alien species. What they really meant was that he could handle situations that would break ordinary diplomats. His aide, Lucy Park, walked up beside him. She was young, only 28, with black hair tied back in a neat bun. This was her first major diplomatic mission. Her hands shook slightly as she held her datapad. "Sir, we're receiving docking instructions from the station," she said. Daniel nodded without turning from the window. "What do you think of this Era Prime, Lucy?" She looked at the planet below. Its surface was covered with gleaming cities that stretched across entire continents. Orbital stations surrounded it like a crown of metal and glass. "It's beautiful, sir," Daniel agreed. The Thessari had been building their civilization for 40,000 years. They were traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. He paused. "They've also been telling younger species what to do for most of that time. They don't like it when someone says no." Lucy swallowed nervously. "And we said no 3 times?" Daniel finally turned from the window. His expression was still calm, but there was something hard beneath it. "They told us to stop colonizing the Orion Spur. We explained that those systems were unclaimed, and we had every right to settle them. They disagreed. Now they've summoned us here to discuss boundary concerns. Do you think they'll negotiate in good faith, sir?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "No," he said simply. "I don't think they will." The Starbound Grace descended toward the main docking station. It was a massive structure, large enough to hold thousands of ships from across the galaxy. The human vessel looked small and fragile compared to the alien cruisers surrounding it. Inside the station's command center, High Counselor Vethrin watched the human ship approach. He was a Visari, standing 8 feet tall with a body covered in hard chitin plates. 4 eyes studied the vessel with cold hatred. His mandibles clicked together as he thought about the soft creatures inside. Humans. They had only been in space for 200 years. They were infants compared to the elder races. Yet they had spread across dozens of star systems with alarming speed. They bred quickly and adapted to environments that should have killed them. Worst of all, they refused to accept the natural order of the galaxy. The Council had ruled this region of space for millennia. Younger species were expected to obey. Most did so without question. But these humans kept pushing, kept expanding, kept saying no when they should have bowed their heads and accepted their place. "Is everything ready?" Vethrin asked his aide. "Yes, High Counselor. 40 of our finest warriors wait in the council chamber. Additional security forces are positioned throughout the station." "Good." Vethrin's mandibles spread in what passed for a smile among his species. "The human ambassador will be detained. His government will receive our demands along with evidence of his capture. If they comply and withdraw from the disputed systems, he will be returned safely. And if they refuse, High Counselor." Vethrin turned his 4 eyes toward his aide. "Then they will receive him in pieces." 1 piece for each week they delay. The aide bowed his head. It will be done. The starbound Grace settled into its docking berth with a gentle thump. Daniel Cole adjusted his uniform one final time and walked toward the exit ramp. Lucy followed close behind, her datapad clutched to her chest like a shield. Remember, Daniel said quietly as they walked, no matter what happens, stay calm. Fear is a weapon they will use against us if we let them.
Sir.
Lucy's voice was steady, but her face was pale. The ramp lowered with a soft hiss of hydraulics. Bright light flooded in from the docking bay beyond. Daniel could see a delegation of the SARI officials waiting at the bottom, surrounded by armed guards. He walked down the ramp with measured steps. Each footfall echoed in the vast space of the docking bay. He kept his hands visible and his movements slow. Nothing threatening. Nothing that could be misunderstood, but his eyes were moving constantly, counting guards, noting their weapons, measuring distances. Old habits never truly died. 30 years of combat had written certain behaviors into his bones. Ambassador Cole, the lead Thesari official, stepped forward. Welcome to the Thesara Prime. The Council awaits your presence. Thank you, Daniel replied through his translation device. My aide and I are honored to be received. As they walked through the station's corridors, Lucy leaned close to Daniel. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Sir, I'm reading unusual energy signatures on my scanner. Multiple weapon systems are charging throughout the station. Daniel didn't change his expression. He kept walking with the same steady pace, nodding politely to the alien dignitaries they passed. I noticed when we docked. What do we do? Daniel glanced at her. For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. It wasn't fear. It was something older and darker. The look of a predator that had spotted its prey. When it starts, he said, stay behind me. Don't run. Don't scream. Just stay behind me and trust that I know what I'm doing. When what starts, sir? But Daniel didn't answer. They had reached the massive doors of the council chamber. The Thesari guards on either side pushed them open, revealing a vast space filled with alien representatives from dozens of worlds. Daniel Cole, Ambassador of Humanity, walked into the trap with his head held high and his hands relaxed at his sides. He looked like a man walking to his own funeral. He was, in fact, walking to someone else's. The council chamber was designed to make visitors feel small. Crystal pillars rose toward a ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness. Light streamed down from hidden sources, creating pools of brightness surrounded by shadow. The walls were covered with carvings that told the history of the Thesari Empire. Thousands of years of conquest and rule. Representatives from dozens of species filled the observation galleries that lined the chamber walls. They had been summoned to witness this moment. Most didn't know exactly what was about to happen, but they could feel it in the air. Something important was coming. Something that would be remembered. Daniel Cole walked alone into the center of the chamber. A spotlight followed him, making him the focus of every eye in the room. His aide Lucy had been stopped at the entrance by guards who claimed it was standard procedure for security reasons. He stood in the petitioner's circle, a raised platform in the exact center of the floor. This was where younger species came to beg favors from the council. The positioning was deliberate. Anyone standing there had to look up at the council members on their elevated thrones. High Counselor Vethrin sat on the largest throne, his chitin armor gleaming in the light. He looked down at the small human with all 4 of his eyes. Around him, the other council members watched with expressions of contempt and anticipation. Ambassador Cole Vethrin's voice boomed through the chamber, translated into English by hidden devices. You stand before the Galactic Council to answer for your species' crimes. Daniel's expression didn't change. I was told this meeting concerned boundary discussions. Your boundaries are the crime. Vethrin leaned forward. Humanity has been found in violation of Galactic Statute 7291. You have colonized worlds within the protected sphere of the Dreth hegemony. You have ignored 3 lawful orders to withdraw your settlers. The Council has determined that your species requires correction. A murmur ran through the galleries. The word correction had a specific meaning in Council space. It meant punishment. It meant pain. And what form will this correction take? Daniel asked. His voice was calm, curious, as if he were asking about the weather. "You will remain here as our guest," Vethrin said, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "Your government will receive our demands. They will withdraw from the disputed systems immediately. They will pay reparations for the damage caused by their illegal settlements. And they will accept permanent restrictions on future expansion. And if they refuse—" Vethrin's 4 eyes narrowed. "Then you will serve as an example of what happens to species that defy the Galactic Council. Your suffering will be broadcast to every human world. Your government will watch you beg for death before we grant it." The doors around the chamber burst open. Armed guards flooded in from every direction. Daniel counted 40 of them, each one a Thessary warrior standing 7 feet tall. Their chitin armor was ceremonial but functional. They carried plasma lances that could burn through steel and neural. Disruptors that could fry a nervous system from 20 feet away. They formed a circle around Daniel, weapons raised, waiting for the order. Daniel looked at the soldiers surrounding him. He looked at their weapons, their armor, their positioning. Then he looked up at Vethrin on his throne. "I'm going to give you one chance," Daniel said. His voice was still calm, but something in it had changed. It was harder now, colder. "One chance to apologize, release my aid, and pretend this diplomatic incident never occurred." Silence fell over the chamber. Then laughter erupted from the galleries. Alien delegates howled and clicked and whistled with amusement. A single human, surrounded by 40 elite warriors, was threatening the High Counselor of the Galactic Council. Vethrin's mandibles spread wide in a grin. "Seize him." The nearest guard stepped forward and reached for Daniel's arm. What happened next would become legend. Daniel moved faster than the guard's eyes could follow. His hand intercepted the reaching limb and twisted. There was a sound like breaking wood as the joint shattered. In the same motion, Daniel stripped the plasma lance from the falling guard's grip and spun it around. 3 shots fired in less than a second. 3 guards dropped. Holes burned through their armor, where their secondary nerve clusters were located. Weak points that no human should have known about. The remaining guards froze for half a heartbeat, trying to understand what had just happened. That half heartbeat was the last mistake many of them would ever make. Daniel was no longer standing in place. He was moving through the formation like smoke through fingers. Every movement was precise, efficient, deadly. He didn't waste motion. He didn't hesitate. He flowed from one target to the next with the grace of a dancer and the purpose of an executioner. A guard swung his neural disruptor toward Daniel's head. Daniel ducked under the weapon, drove his fist into the gap between the guard's chest plates, and crushed something vital inside. Before the body hit the ground, Daniel had already moved to the next target. 10 guards fell in the first 8 seconds. The survivors began firing wildly. Plasma bolts scorched the air where Daniel had been a moment before. But he was never where they aimed. He used their own bodies as shields, turned their numbers against them, created chaos in their ranks. He killed with his hands when weapons were too slow. He knew their anatomy better than they knew it themselves. Every weak point in their chitin, every gap in their armor, every vulnerable nerve cluster and blood vessel. He had studied the Thessary for years, was preparing for a day he hoped would never come. 20 guards fell in the next. 12 seconds. The remaining guards began to panic. They had trained for decades. They had fought in wars that humanity couldn't imagine. But they had never faced anything like this. This human moved wrong. He was too fast, too precise, too deadly. He wasn't fighting them. He was harvesting them. 30 seconds after the first guard reached for him, Daniel Cole stood alone in a circle of broken bodies. He wasn't breathing hard. His uniform was torn in a few places and stained with alien blood, but he was uninjured. The plasma lance in his hand was still warm from firing. He looked up at High Counselor Vethrin. The Thessary leader had risen from his throne. All 4 eyes wide with an emotion his species rarely felt. Fear. Primal fear. "I believe," Daniel said quietly. "I asked for an apology." The observation galleries had gone completely silent. Representatives from dozens of worlds stared down at the scene below, unable to process what they had witnessed. Their understanding of humans, of the galaxy, of power itself was crumbling before their eyes. Daniel set the plasma lance down on the floor. He straightened his torn uniform, brushing off a spot of blood with casual ease. "I'm still waiting," he said. Vethren's mandibles worked, but no sound came out. He had ordered the deaths of ambassadors before. He had broken species that dared to challenge council authority. But he had never seen anything like the creature standing in his chamber, surrounded by the bodies of his finest warriors. In the distance, alarms began to wail. More guards would be coming. Hundreds of them. Perhaps thousands. Daniel Cole didn't seem concerned. He simply stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by death, and waited for an answer. The alarms screamed through the station like wounded animals. Red lights flashed in the corridors outside the council chamber. The sound of running feet echoed from every direction as security forces mobilized to respond to the impossible situation unfolding in the heart of their power. Inside the chamber, chaos had erupted in the observation galleries. Alien delegates scrambled over each other, trying to reach the exits. Some were screaming in frequencies humans couldn't hear. Others had frozen in their seats, unable to move, unable to look away from the single human standing among the fallen guards. Daniel Cole ignored the panic around him. He walked through the bodies with careful steps, approaching the raised platform where the council thrones sat. His movement was unhurried, almost casual. Like a man taking a morning walk, High Counselor Vethren had not moved from his throne. His body was rigid, his 4 eyes locked on the approaching human. The other council members had fled at the first sign of violence, but Vethren remained. Perhaps he was too proud to run. Perhaps he was too afraid. "What are you?" The words came out as a whisper, barely audible above the alarms. Daniel stopped at the base of the platform and looked up at the sorry leader. "I'm a diplomat," he said simply. "Before that, I was a soldier. Before that, I was something else entirely. No diplomat could do what you just did. You're right." Daniel nodded. "That's because you don't understand what a human diplomat really is. You don't understand what any human really is." He began walking up the steps, toward Vethren's throne. The Thesari pressed back against his seat, but didn't flee. "Your intelligence services looked at humanity and saw soft creatures," Daniel continued. "Small teeth, no claws, no natural armor, no venom. You saw prey animals who somehow stumbled into space travel. You assumed we were weak because we didn't look dangerous." He reached the top of the steps and stood before the throne. Close enough to touch the trembling High Counselor? This was a profound mistake. "We are the rulers of this region of space," Vethren managed to say. "We have conquered species far more powerful than humans." "Have you?" Daniel tilted his head slightly. "Tell me about them. Tell me about the species that evolved on death worlds, where every other creature was trying to kill them. Tell me about the species that hunted megafauna 10 times their size using nothing but sharpened sticks and cooperation. Tell me about the species that survived ice ages and supervolcano eruptions and mass extinctions." Vethren said nothing. Daniel said, "because you've never met one before." "Until now." He turned and walked back down the steps, putting distance between himself and the throne. His back was to Vethren, completely exposed. It was a message. He didn't consider the High Counselor a threat. "Humanity evolved as persistence predators," Daniel explained. "Do you know what that means?" "It means our ancestors would pick a target and follow it. Not chase it. Follow it. For hours. For days they would walk after their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. The prey would run and run, thinking it had escaped, and then look back and see those same 2-legged figures still coming. Always coming. Never stopping." He turned to face the galleries where a few brave delegates still watched from the shadows. "We don't need claws because we invented knives 2 million years ago. We don't need armor because we learned to kill our enemies before they could touch us. We don't need venom because we turned poison into medicine and medicine into poison. Every natural advantage you have, we found a way to overcome before we even left our home planet." The doors to the chamber exploded inward. Not from the expected security forces, but from something else entirely. 12 figures in dark combat armor flowed into the room with the same lethal precision Daniel had displayed. They moved like shadows, securing every corner of the chamber in seconds. Daniel didn't flinch at the explosion. He simply nodded to the lead figure as they approached. "Commander Kim, thank you for joining us." The lead figure removed her helmet, revealing a young woman with sharp features and cold eyes. Lieutenant Commander Grace Kim had been Daniel's backup plan from the beginning. "Sir," she handed him a communication device. "Admiral Patterson is on the line, and I have good news. The fleet arrived 3 minutes ago. They're holding position at the edge of the system." Daniel accepted the device and activated it. A holographic image appeared beside him, showing a man with silver hair and a face like carved stone. Admiral Christopher Patterson commanded the human Fourth Fleet. He was not known for his patience or his mercy. "Daniel." The Admiral's voice was calm, but carried an edge of dark amusement. "I see you've been making friends." "A minor disagreement about diplomatic procedures, Admiral. Nothing that couldn't be resolved through conversation." Patterson's eyes moved to the bodies scattered across the chamber floor. "Your conversations are always so productive." His gaze shifted to Vethrin, still frozen on his throne. "High Counselor, I hope you're paying attention to what happens next." The observation windows of the chamber looked out into space. For the past several hours, those windows had shown only stars and the orbital traffic of the Sara Prime. Now they showed something else. Human warships. They emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. First came the destroyers, lean and fast, their weapons already charging. Then the cruisers, bristling with missile tubes and railguns. And finally, dominating the formation like a mountain among hills, the heavy carrier Unconquered Sun. This was not a diplomatic escort. This was a battle fleet. Vethrin stared at the ships filling his sky. His mandibles worked soundlessly. "You brought a fleet," he finally managed to say. "You came for negotiations, and you brought a war fleet." Daniel turned to face him. "We came for negotiations. We hoped you would conduct them in good faith. But hope is not a strategy, High Counselor. We prepared for the possibility that you might try something foolish. You could have told us you had military support nearby. Would it have mattered?" Daniel shook his head slowly. "You had already decided to kidnap me before my ship even arrived. You were going to torture me and send pieces of my body to Earth as a warning. You didn't want to negotiate. You wanted to dominate, to humiliate, to teach the young species their place." He walked closer to the throne, and this time his voice was hard as iron. "So let me teach you something instead. Humans don't submit. We don't bow. We don't accept our place. We decide what our place is, and we make the universe accept it." He gestured to the fallen guards around them. "These soldiers learn that lesson. Your entire species is about to learn it. And you, High Counselor, are going to be the one who delivers that lesson to the galaxy." Through the windows, more ships continued to arrive. The human fleet grew larger by the minute. Spreading across the sky like a promise of destruction, Vethrin finally understood. This wasn't a rescue mission. This wasn't even a show of force. This was humanity announcing to the galaxy that the rules had changed, and he had given them the excuse they needed to make that announcement. The human fleet hung in space like a gathering storm. 37 warships had arrived in the first wave, with more dropping out of hyperspace every few minutes. The Unconquered Sun sat at the center of the formation, its massive hull blocking out stars. Around it, destroyers and cruisers moved in precise patterns. Their weapons powered, but not yet locked on targets. On the Sara Prime's surface, emergency sirens had begun to wail. The planetary defense grid was activating for the first time in 300 years. Citizens looked up at the sky and saw something their ancestors had never imagined: an alien fleet strong enough to threaten the heart of galactic civilization in the council chamber. High Counselor Vethrin had finally risen from his throne. His legs were unsteady, but pride kept him standing. Around him, the tactical team, led by Commander Grace Kim, had secured every entrance. The remaining council members had been located and were being escorted back to their seats. Admiral Patterson's hologram stood before them all. Larger than life, his silver hair and cold eyes filling the space where the petitioner's circle had been. "Let me explain what happens now," the Admiral said. his voice carrying the weight of human military authority. "You will listen carefully. You will not interrupt. And when I am finished, you will make a choice that determines the future of your species." Vethren's mandibles clicked with suppressed rage. "You dare threaten the seat of the Galactic Council with your primitive fleet? We have ruled these stars for 40,000 years. We have crushed empires that would make your entire species look like insects. And yet," Patterson replied calmly, "your 40 finest warriors are currently decorating your chamber floor, killed by a single human who didn't even break a sweat." He paused to let that sink in. "So perhaps you should reconsider your assumptions about what primitives are capable of." Daniel Cole stepped forward. He had removed his torn jacket and stood in his undershirt, the scars on his arms visible for the first time. Each scar was a story. Each story ended with someone dead and Daniel still standing. "Hi, Counselor. I'm going to offer you something your species has never offered anyone else. Mercy." Vethren's 4 eyes blinked in confusion. "Mercy. The fleet outside could reduce this station to debris in 11 minutes, Daniel said. "I know because I helped design the attack plan 6 years ago, when we realized the Council would eventually try something like this. We have weapons your scientists haven't even theorized about yet. Kinetic impactors that could crack your planet's crust. Biological agents tailored to this RE physiology. Electronic warfare systems that could turn your own defenses against you." He let those words hang in the air. "We could end your civilization today. We could do to you what you've done to 100 younger species who defied the Council. And there is nothing you could do to stop us. And why don't you?" Vethren demanded. "If you're so powerful, why waste time talking?" Daniel's expression softened slightly. It wasn't warmth. It was something closer to pity. "'Cause we're not you," he said simply. "We didn't come to the stars looking for enemies. We came looking for allies. Friends. We wanted to join the galactic community and contribute something new. We wanted to learn from species who had traveled between stars while we were still figuring out fire." He walked to the observation window and looked out at the fleet. The unconquered sun's running lights blinked in the darkness like a heartbeat. But you wouldn't let us. You saw our colonies and decided we were threats. You made demands instead of requests. You threatened instead of negotiated. And when we refused to bow, you decided to teach us a lesson in pain." He turned back to face the Council. "So now, we teach you a different lesson. Not in pain. In respect." Admiral Patterson's hologram stepped forward. "In approximately 6 hours, representatives from every human colony world will arrive at this station. They are not diplomats. They are witnesses. They will document everything that has happened here and broadcast it to every world in Council space." "You can't," one of the other Council members began. "I am not finished." Patterson's voice cracked like a whip. The alien fell silent immediately. "Along with those witnesses, legal experts from 14 neutral species will arrive to investigate the attack on Ambassador Cole. They will review sensor logs, interview witnesses, and compile evidence of the Council's attempted kidnapping and murder of a diplomatic representative." Lucy Park was escorted into the chamber by 2 of the tactical team members. She looked shaken, but unharmed. Her eyes went wide when she saw the bodies on the floor and the fleet outside the windows. But she quickly composed herself and moved to stand beside Daniel. "Sir," she said quietly, "are you all right?" "I'm fine, Lucy." Daniel gave her a small smile. "Sorry you had to wait so long," Patterson continued his address to the Council. "Once the investigation is complete, humanity will present its demands to the full Galactic Assembly. Those demands are simple. Full recognition of our territorial claims in the Orion Spur, a permanent seat on this council with voting rights equal to any elder race, and a formal, public apology from High Counselor Vethren, broadcast to every inhabited world in known space." Vethren's chitin plates rattled with fury. "The Council has never apologized to any species. We are the supreme authority in this region. We do not bow to children barely out of their gravity well. Then let me be clear about what happens if you refuse." Patterson's voice dropped to something almost gentle, which somehow made it more frightening. This fleet is not our full strength. It's not even a significant portion of our full strength. We have been building warships in secret shipyards for the past 50 years. Ever since we realized the Council would never accept us as equals, he let that information register on the alien faces before him. If you refuse our terms, we will blockade this system. No ship will enter or leave without our permission. Your economy will collapse within months. Your colonies will start to starve within a year. And when you are weak enough, we will take everything we asked for today, plus interest. Other species will come to our defense, another council member said desperately. We have allies. The Dreth Hegemony, the Vorn Collective. Have been contacted? Patterson interrupted. They received evidence of your attack on our ambassador approximately 1 hour ago. They have both expressed their intention to remain neutral in any conflict between humanity and the Council. His lip twitched in something that might have been amusement. It seems they are not eager to defend allies who kidnap diplomats and threaten to torture them to death. Daniel watched the council members as the truth of their situation sank in. They had spent so long at the top of galactic civilization that they had forgotten what it felt like to be vulnerable. They had bullied and threatened and conquered until they believed they were. It's untouchable. Now they were learning a hard lesson about the nature of power. It was not given by titles or traditions. It was taken by those strong enough to claim it. You have 6 hours, Daniel said quietly. Use them wisely. Think about what kind of future you want for your species. Think about whether pride is worth the cost of everything you've built. He turned and walked toward the exit, Lucy falling into step beside him. The tactical team moved with them, maintaining security even now. At the door, Daniel paused and looked back at Vethrin. I meant what I said earlier. I came here hoping for peace. I still hope for peace. But hope is not a strategy, High Counselor. If you force us to fight, we will win. And the galaxy will remember what happened to the species that thought they could break humanity. He walked out, leaving the council to face their impossible choice. Through the windows, the human fleet continued to grow. 3 weeks had passed since the day that changed. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was finally over. Delegates from 200 species had witnessed the proceedings, and trillions more had watched the broadcasts across known space. What they saw would reshape the political landscape of the galaxy for centuries to come. Hi. Counselor Vethrin stood before the assembly and delivered his apology. His voice was steady, but those who knew his species could see the trembling in his mandibles, the shame burning in his 4 eyes. He admitted to ordering the attack on Ambassador Cole. He admitted to planning torture and murder. He admitted that the Galactic Council had been wrong. It was the first public apology in the Council's 40,000-year history. When he finished speaking, Vethrin stepped down from his position as High Counselor. He would return to his homeworld in disgrace, stripped of all titles and honors. The Thesari government had already announced they would be launching an investigation into how he had led them to this humiliation. But the changes did not stop with one leader's fall. The treaty signed that day gave humanity everything they had demanded: full recognition of their colonial territories in the Orion Spur, a permanent seat on the council with voting rights equal to any elder race, a position on the Security Directorate where decisions about galactic law enforcement were made, and something no young species had ever received, a formal declaration that humanity would be considered a major power in galactic affairs. Daniel Cole watched the final votes from the diplomatic gallery. Lucy Park sat beside him, still processing everything. That had happened since their arrival on Sasara Prime. Still can't believe it worked, she said. Quietly, it only worked because they gave us no other choice.
Daniels.
The voice was tired but satisfied. If Vethrin had simply talked to us, negotiated in good faith, none of this would have happened. We would have accepted reasonable boundaries. We would have worked within the system. They couldn't do that. No. Daniel shook his head slowly. They couldn't. They had spent too long being the strongest power in this region. They forgot that strength is not permanent. They forgot that every empire eventually meets something it cannot crush. Voting concluded. The treaty was ratified. Across the galaxy, news networks began broadcasting the results. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone knew it. In the weeks that followed, humanity's position in galactic society transformed in ways no one had predicted. Species that had once ignored human diplomats now sought audiences with them. Trade delegations arrived at human worlds with offers of technology and resources. Military observers requested permission to study human tactics and training methods. The smaller species, those who had lived under the Council's authority for generations, began reaching out through back channels. They had watched a single human defeat 40 elite warriors. They had watched a human fleet make the Council bend its knee. They saw something in humanity that they had never dared to hope for. A species that could change the rules. Daniel remained at his post on the Sara Prime. His reputation preceded him now. Aliens who had once looked at humans with contempt now studied him with respect and wariness. The story of what he had done in the council chamber had spread across known space. Growing larger with each retelling, some called him a monster. Some called him a hero. Daniel didn't care about the labels. He cared about results. One evening, he stood at the observation deck of the human embassy, watching the lights of the Sara Prime spread across the continent below. The fleet had mostly returned home, leaving only a small defensive force to protect human interests. The unconquered sun was gone, back to its patrol routes in human space. But everyone remembered that it could return. Lucy joined him at the window, holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to him, and they stood together in comfortable silence. "What happens now?" she finally asked. Daniel took a sip of his coffee before answering. "Now we do what we came here to do. Build relationships. Establish trade. Find common ground with species who are finally willing to treat us as equals. Do you think they'll ever really accept us?" "Some will. Some won't," shrugged. "It doesn't matter. We don't need their acceptance. We just need their respect." He turned away from the window and walked toward his office. There was work to do. Always more work. Treaties to negotiate, agreements to draft, relationships to build. The violent chapter was over, but the harder chapter was just beginning. "The galaxy has hundreds of intelligent species," he said over his shoulder. "Most of them have known peace for so long, they've forgotten what real conflict looks like. They built their civilizations on cooperation and diplomacy because they never had to fight for survival the way we did." Lucy followed him, listening carefully. "That's why they underestimated us," Daniel continued. "They saw soft skin and assumed weakness. They didn't understand that we're soft on the outside because we don't need armor. We survived ice ages and predators and each other. We built weapons before we built houses. We learned to kill efficiently because inefficient killers didn't survive long enough to pass on their genes." He stopped at his office door and looked back at her. "But that's not all we are. We're also artists and scientists and dreamers. We build beautiful things. We explore because we're curious. We reach out to the stars because sitting still feels like dying."
8.
He smiled slightly. "That's what I want the galaxy to understand about humanity. Yes, we can be death in a uniform when we need to be, but we would rather be friends. And if they don't want to be friends, then they learn the same lesson the Council learned." His smile faded. "We hoped for peace. We prepared for war. And when they forced our hand, we showed them exactly what they were dealing with." He opened his office door. "Get some rest, Lucy. Tomorrow we have meetings with the Vorn trade delegation. They want to discuss technology exchanges. It seems they've decided humans might make useful partners after all." "Yes, sir." She hesitated. "Sir? Do you ever regret it? The fighting? I mean, the killing." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that they gave me no other choice. But I don't regret protecting my people. I don't regret showing the galaxy that humans won't be pushed around." He met her eyes. "Sometimes the only way to achieve peace is to demonstrate that you're capable of terrible war. It's not fair. It's not noble. But it's the truth of how the universe works." He stepped into his office and closed the door. Outside the embassy windows, the stars shone down on the Sara Prime. Somewhere out there, on worlds scattered across the galaxy, beings of every shape and size were thinking about humanity in ways they never had before. Some feared what humans might do with their new power. Some hoped humanity would be a force for positive change. Some simply watched and waited to see what would happen next, and on 1,000 human worlds, children looked up at those same stars and dreamed of the futures they might build among them. They didn't know the politics or the history or the violence that had secured their place in the galaxy. They only knew that the universe was open to them now in ways it had never been before. That was Daniel Cole's true victory. Not the fallen guards, or the humbled council, or the treaties signed under threat of force. His victory was that future generations of humans would grow up in a galaxy that respected them. They would never have to prove their worth the way his generation had. They could simply be human. In all the complicated and wonderful ways that meant, he sat at his desk and began reviewing the next day's briefings. The work continued. The galaxy kept turning, and humanity kept reaching for the stars exactly as they always had. Some things, it seemed, would never change.